The Senate hearing room didn't feel like a place of democracy that day. It felt like a courtroom, no a theater, but not one of laughter. This was the kind of theater where silence is a weapon and the stakes are legacy truth in history. The light overhead wasn't warm. It was cold clinical, like the lights above an operating table. The air was so still it felt manufactured. Even the walls made from Italian marble quarried for monuments didn't just reflect sound, they amplified tension. Cameras were everywhere. Journalists, some seasoned enough to have covered Watergate, sat motionless, their fingers poised over keyboards, not daring to blink. Everyone in the room sensed something was off. They couldn't name it yet, but they could feel it, a kind of pressure that didn't come from politics, but from truth waiting to erupt. At the center of this room sat Donald Trump. He entered like he owned the floor, like a king stepping into his court. He didn't shake hands. He didn't acknowledge the press. He just walked slow and confident, as if the walls were familiar friends and the cameras were old lovers. And when he reached his seat, he didn't sit. He settled like a man who believed the hearing was just another chance to repeat the legend he'd built, that he was powerful because of who he was, not what he'd done. That blood mattered more than truth. His suit was navy blue, the kind that whispers money and status. His tie bold red, his cufflinks gold-plated. Every detail screamed legacy. Every movement oozed practiced dominance. But perhaps the most telling thing was the way he looked at the panel, not with respect, but with boredom, as if he'd already won. Because for 77 years, Trump had lived in a world where myth carried more weight than fact, where his last name wasn't just a name, it was a brand, a weapon, a shield. And that day, he thought he'd sit through a few tough questions, dodge a few criticisms, flash that half smile that says, "You can't touch me," and walk away untouched again. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly predict, was that someone had come prepared to burn the myth down. Not with drama, not with insults, but with something he had no defense for: verified truth. Jasmine Crockett wasn't here for headlines. She was here for history. While all eyes were glued to the man at center stage, she entered quiet, focused, and deadly precise. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic coat flares, no political wave to the cameras. Jasmine Crockett moved with the stillness of a surgeon about to begin an operation, calm on the surface, but every step deliberate. She didn't need a podium to assert power. She brought her own gravity into the room. Her eyes scanned the chamber not in fear, but in calculation. Noticing who leaned forward, who avoided eye contact, who already underestimated her. She wore a deep navy blazer, perfectly fitted, her hair pulled back in tight elegance. But it wasn't her outfit that drew attention. It was what she carried, a white envelope, plain, unassuming, no markings, no dramatics. Just sealed in red wax, a shade that under those sterile overhead lights glowed like blood. That envelope didn't contain opinion. It didn't hold political spin. It carried evidence. The kind of evidence that doesn't whisper, it detonates. In her left hand, she held the quietest object in the room, but it was the most dangerous. And only she knew the full weight of what it could do. For inside that white envelope was a truth so devastating, so unchallengeable, it could collapse a legacy 77 years in the making. She hadn't come to argue. She had come to reveal. And the man across from her, arms still stretched like a monarch, was about to learn that dynasties don't die with a bang, they die with a document. It happened in a single sentence. Trump leaned forward, the smirk already forming, as if he were about to deliver a punchline, not just to Jasmine Crockett, but to the entire American public watching at home. He adjusted his cufflinks with exaggerated flair and spoke into the microphone with that familiar bravado, "I am living proof of superior genetics." The room didn't gasp, but it froze. It was the kind of statement he'd made 100 times before at rallies and interviews on television. But here in this moment, under oath in a chamber built for truth, those words carried weight they'd never carried before. Because Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't interrupt. She didn't fire back. She didn't even blink. Instead, she just looked at him and smirked. Not a full smile, not even a smirk of sarcasm. Just a slight knowing lift at the corner of her mouth. As if to say, "Thank you, you just handed me exactly what I needed." It wasn't theatrical, it was calculated. That tiny, barely noticeable expression sent a ripple through the room. Staffers exchanged looks, journalists paused mid-keystroke, even some of Trump's own aides sat up straighter, because they knew. Something had shifted. and most viewers didn't even realize it, not yet. But the first crack in the foundation had just formed, and it was Trump himself who had swung the hammer. Jasmine Crockett didn't come to the hearing with a speech. She came with a strategy, and that strategy lived inside a slim chestnut brown leather case, worn from late nights and courtroom wars, but now resting on the table like a loaded weapon. She laid it flat, unclasped it slowly like a surgeon peeling back a sterile drape, and revealed the contents with almost ceremonial precision. What was inside? Not chaos, not improvisation, order, intent, war-level preparation. Her documents weren't just papers. They were color-coded weapons. Yellow folders held background intelligence, Trump family timelines, public statements, real estate filings, tax records, the DNA of the legend. Blue folders carried medical data, hospital admission forms, archived test results, genetic chain references, the actual DNA. And then there were the red folders, heavy, thick, and dangerous. These she called privately nuclear. Inside were signed genetic reports from Johns Hopkins, legal approvals, chain of custody documents, proof so tightly built it couldn't be bent, only dropped like a hammer. Each tab, each page, each staple had a purpose. Nothing was there by accident. Nothing was printed last minute. This wasn't evidence, this was a countdown. A carefully synchronized mission where every file was a warhead and every minute was a ticking fuse. And Jasmine, she wasn't just a congresswoman today. She was the executioner. She moved like someone who wasn't hoping to win, but preparing to confirm it. There was no hesitation, no shaking hands, no nervous glances to staffers, just silence, poise, and precision. Jasmine Crockett reached into the leather case with measured stillness, her fingers brushing over each folder like a pianist searching for the first note of a sonata she'd rehearsed 1,000 times. She didn't need to rush, because when you own the truth, time becomes your instrument, and Jasmine was playing every second like it was part of her orchestration. Her hand moved slowly, deliberately, until it found the blue folder. The room seemed to lean in. One camera operator, almost by instinct, began to zoom in on her hand. Not her face, not the committee members. Her hand. Because even without words, the entire nation could sense something's about to happen. The way her fingers moved, the care, and how she opened the flap, the controlled breath she took before sliding the first document out, it was like watching someone detonate a truth bomb, but in slow motion. Every motion screamed, I know what I'm holding, and I know what it's about to do. Jasmine didn't just carry evidence. She became the evidence. And as that blue folder opened frame by frame, click by click, hearts across the country began to race. Even before a single word was spoken, because sometimes the calm before the storm is louder than the storm itself. It was subtle, almost too subtle. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't challenge Trump directly. She simply asked. Her tone was even, measured, professional. Mr. Trump, she began, you've repeatedly referred to your family's inherited excellence, including terms like good breeding and superior genetics. For the record, are you affirming that you are biologically 100% Trump? The question hung in the air like a ticking clock. Trump didn't blink. He leaned forward, a grin forming as if he'd just been handed a microphone at one of his rallies. And then in front of cameras, under oath on national record, he said it, Trump, 100%. Everyone knows that. Boom. He thought it was a flex, a declaration of dominance. But what he didn't realize was that he just locked himself in a box Jasmine built. Because in that moment with that statement, he didn't just confirm his pride. He confirmed his claim. And that meant Jasmine could now challenge it with evidence. Across the country, millions of viewers didn't yet understand what had just happened. But they felt it. The tone of the room shifted. The game changed. The stage was no longer a platform. It was a trap. And Donald Trump had just willingly, even proudly stepped inside. The moment was so quiet you could hear paper slide. Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't pound the table. She simply reached into the blue folder, the one marked medical documentation, and pulled out a single cream-colored document. It looked aged, yellowed at the edges, stamped with multiple seals, and across the top in bold serif font, Jamaica Hospital birth record. The camera zoomed in, screens across America lit up. This wasn't a memo, it wasn't an allegation, it was a primary source. She slid it into the overhead projector. The birth certificate illuminated on the chamber screens clear as day. Date of birth, June 14, 1946. Location, Jamaica Hospital, Queens, New York. Male infant, healthy, full term, father, mother. No mention of Fred Trump, no mention of Marianne McLeod. The silence that followed wasn't shock, it was recognition. Fred Trump, the patriarch of an empire the man Trump claimed as his origin, was nowhere on the document. No signature, no stamp, no bloodline. Across the country, jaws dropped. In the chamber, eyes darted. And Trump, his grin had vanished. He stared at the screen, and for the first time that day, his face went still. It was just one word, a word spoken softly, clearly, without drama: adoption. Jasmine didn't raise her eyebrows. She didn't pause for effect. She simply let the word fall like a drop of ink into clear water. And that's all it took. Across the chamber, the energy snapped. Trump, who had been tapping his fingers rhythmically on the glass table, stopped. Mid-beat, mid-rhythm, mid-bluster. The cameras caught it, all of them, from multiple angles. His fingers frozen, his eyes shifting, his posture stiffening, and the silence that followed, exactly 3.5 seconds long. It doesn't sound like much. But in a televised hearing, in a room full of political sharks, 3.5 seconds of dead silence is an earthquake. The press noticed, staffers noticed, America noticed. Trump had been laughing, performing, owning the space. But now he was calculating, searching, scanning, and Jasmine. She sat still, patient, like someone who knew the trap had just sprung. The word was simple, but the impact irreversible. The silence hadn't even settled when Jasmine slid the next document forward. This one was different, thicker, stamped in blue and gold, the seal of the New York State Department of Health. She didn't look at Trump. She didn't need to. Instead, she turned to the committee and spoke with surgical clarity. We cross-referenced birth records from Jamaica Hospital with adoption files obtained from Catholic Charities of New York. The evidence is consistent and complete. Donald J. Trump was adopted in March 1947. The room didn't breathe. Jasmine continued. According to these records, the biological parents were Friedrich Trump and Margaret Schmidt, German immigrants, who arrived in the U.S. in late 1945. Their son was born June 14, 1946, but both parents died 6 months later during a tuberculosis outbreak that devastated immigrant neighborhoods in Queens. Trump's expression twisted, not in confusion but in recognition. For a brief moment, it looked like he knew the names. Like somewhere deep down, those names lived in an old file no one was ever supposed to open again. He was placed into the care of Catholic Charities, Jasmine added, and formally adopted by Fred Trump and Marianne Trump in March 1947. She paused not for dramatic effect, but out of respect for the gravity of what she just said. Because this wasn't just a correction. It was a rewriting of identity. The man who'd built an empire on a last name wasn't born with it. He inherited nothing except a lie. And then it cracked. The poise, the confidence, the arms spread across the back of the chair. It all collapsed in a matter of seconds. Trump leaned forward, a voice raised, eyes wild. This is fake news. You can't just test my DNA without permission. This is a political ambush. His words came fast, too fast. The rhythm was off, the volume uneven. His sentences began overlapping, stepping on each other like panic rushing through a crowd. He wasn't arguing anymore. He was reacting. Instinctively, emotionally, desperately. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't even look at him. She simply opened the red folder, the nuclear one. For the record, she said calmly, the DNA sample was legally obtained during your 2019 presidential physical examination at Johns Hopkins Medical Center. The room froze again. As part of that exam, she continued, you voluntarily submitted biological samples, including blood and saliva, for full-spectrum health testing. As a public official, those records became part of the government's health transparency database, subject to standard legal review. Trump blinked. Hard. Furthermore, Jasmine added, her tone steady as stone, your own legal team authorized the comparison against preserved Trump family DNA in April of last year. That request was signed and logged. This was no ambush, Mr. Trump. This was procedure. His face fell. His defense evaporated. The envelope was white, no seal, no logo, just one red stamp. Confidential, classified, level 2. Jasmine held it up with one hand and opened it slowly. The sound of the paper tearing was louder than it should have been. Or maybe the room was just that quiet. She pulled out the results, 4 pages stapled at the top left corner. No one breathed. The DNA comparison report she began issued by the Office of Presidential Medical Oversight. She flipped to the final page. Section 5, Genealogical Consistency Analysis. Her eyes scanned the results, then locked with the camera. Result 1, 0.0% genetic markers shared with Fred Trump, the man you claim as your father. Gasps. Result 2, 0.0% match with any known Trump bloodline samples on file, including from Marianne Trump Barry and Robert Trump. Another gasp. A louder one. Jasmine didn't pause. Result 3, 94.7% genetic match with samples belonging to Friedrich Trumpf and Margaret Schmidt, both German immigrants deceased in 1946 from tuberculosis-related complications. And then she looked up directly at Trump. This is not a debate. This is not speculation. This is science. The room broke, gasps, cries, shouted objections, reporters scrambling, flashbulbs firing. But Jasmine, she simply closed the folder and placed it back into her leather case like a judge delivering a death sentence. Trump frozen, like the truth had just broken every bone of the identity he'd built for decades. The moment didn't feel real, but the cameras were rolling. Dozens of them zooming in, broadcasting live, capturing the precise second the myth broke. Trump's eyes wide, disoriented, his mouth half open, searching for a word that wouldn't come. His fingers trembled, still hovering above the table, the posture of a man used to control, now crumbling from within. For the first time in decades, Donald J. Trump looked small. The room silent, the kind of silence you only hear in two places, a funeral or a fall. Reporters didn't even type. Senators didn't whisper. Even the microphones seemed afraid to record. Jasmine didn't say a word. She didn't need to, because in front of all America on live television, a name had just been erased. Not with violence, not with vengeance, but with truth. The Trump brand, once etched into buildings, golf courses, bank accounts, campaign rallies, was now just a shadow trembling in a chair. And in that moment, the emperor truly had no name. It was just one sentence, 11 words. But by the time Jasmine Crockett said it, the entire country had already stopped breathing. The truth you buried in 1947 just unearthed your empire. In that instant, history changed. Within seconds, the clip began erupting. Online, formerly Twitter, was flooded. The hashtags, #Trump not Trump, #DN reveal, and who is Donald, trended worldwide in under 8 minutes. Servers failed, the platform's algorithm crashed, and then CNN cut its regular programming. The anchor's voice cracked as he announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing what may be the most stunning political unraveling in American history." Clips spread across Reddit, TikTok, Telegram, Discord. News tickers in Times Square displayed just one quote buried in 1947, exposed in 2025. It wasn't just a mic drop. It was a dynasty collapse captured in HD. America didn't just hear Jasmine's words. It felt them. They echoed in homes, courtrooms, churches, campaign offices. Even Fox News, known for its loyalty, ran the clip on loop. And as the world watched, a name once shouted with pride, now echoed in shame. She didn't shout it. She whispered it like a scalpel, slicing truth into history. He's not genetically superior. He's genetically adopted. Jasmine Crockett, 2025. 3 words, but they detonated across the world like a digital grenade. Within 30 minutes, the phrase became a viral hashtag. Genetically adopted, a t-shirt slogan, worn in protest from LA to Berlin, a front-page headline on the New York Times, The Guardian, Le Monde, and even Der Spiegel. A university debate topic: can political legitimacy survive DNA disqualification? It wasn't just a quote, it was a reckoning. Meme pages exploded. Jasmine's calm delivery was auto-tuned into rap remixes, slowed into TikTok edits, captioned in 27 languages. Late-night hosts, stand-up comics, even rappers in Sao Paulo quoted it on stage. Genetically adopted became the linguistic bullet that pierced not only Trump's ego, but America's obsession with legacy, lineage, and bloodlines. And ironically, those 2 words were more biologically accurate than Trump's decades of bravado. By day 3, people weren't asking, "Is Trump adopted?" They were asking, "How long have we been lied to?" When the clip of Jasmine Crockett's reveal hit 38 million views in just 6 hours. Newsmax and OAN didn't issue statements, they sounded alarms. Fox News canceled its regular primetime lineup. Tucker Carlson reappeared on emergency broadcast, face pale fingers tapping the desk. This is obviously a deep state lie. A forgery, government overreach, weaponized science. Tucker Carlson visibly rattled, but the problem wasn't Jasmine, it was the science. Within 48 hours, 3 of the world's leading genetic research institutions, Mayo Clinic Genomics Center, the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard, Johns Hopkins DNA lab independently confirmed the exact same result. Donald J. Trump shares no genetic markers with the Trump family line. 94.7% match with Friedrich Trump and Margaret Schmidt, both confirmed deceased German immigrants. Suddenly, even conservative pundits were left cornered. Sean Hannity cut mid-segment, leaned toward the camera, and for the first time in 25 years said, "Folks, I need a minute." Social media turned on them. Supporters flooded their inboxes demanding the truth. Behind the scenes, executives at the Daily Caller, Breitbart, and Newsmax held emergency calls, some even hiring independent forensic geneticists to double-check Jasmine's data. None could refute it. What started as media defense soon turned into media meltdown. And for the first time, Trump's army of loyal broadcasters had nothing left to say. The room was still in shock, cameras frozen, anchors blinking, and Donald Trump speechless for the first time in memory. But Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't sneer. She didn't smile. She simply stepped forward, held the final document gently in her hand, and said the words that would reframe the entire national conversation: being adopted is not a shame. Hiding from it is. A quiet murmur spread through the room. Not mockery, not outrage, but reflection. This isn't about mocking a man for being adopted, she continued. It's about integrity, about how power fears truth, and about how truth once spoken can't be revoked. For the first time that day, even critics nodded. In that moment, Jasmine Crockett became something more than a congresswoman. She became a mirror, a voice for millions who were abandoned, displaced, lied to, or forgotten. And for every child who ever looked in the mirror and asked, "Where do I come from?" she answered, "You come from strength. You come from survival. And no name Trump or otherwise defines your worth." The story had shattered a political empire, but what it built in its place was even more powerful. Across America, the phrase "genetically adopted" no longer carried a sting. It became a badge of resilience, of chosen family, of love unbound by chromosomes. Jasmine Crockett took the moment and elevated it. DNA doesn't make you a father. Choice does. Biology doesn't make you a family. Loyalty and love do. Clips of her words played on talk shows, graduation stages, church services. She wasn't just exposing Donald Trump. She was lifting up millions of children in foster care. Single mothers, stepfathers who stepped up, siblings who stood in when no one else would. Adoption isn't weakness, Jasmine said firmly. It's chosen love. The kind that walks into the fire not because it has to, but because it wants to. In that moment, what began as scandal became scripture for a new generation. A generation that believes in love, that chooses not love that's inherited. The chamber was heavy with silence. Trump sat frozen, but Jasmine wasn't just speaking to him anymore. She was speaking to millions. Her voice sharpened not in anger, but in truth. If your success is real, then be proud you rose above your beginnings. Don't cling to a false myth. Don't hide behind a bloodline that isn't yours. For a moment, it felt as though every foster child, every immigrant, every person told they were less than was sitting in that room, listening to someone finally put their pain into words. She continued, America's greatest strength has never been perfect blood. It has always been imperfect people. Immigrants, orphans, workers who refused to stay silent, who built lives out of struggle, and who rose higher than anyone expected. The crowd stirred. Some wiped their eyes. Even hardened reporters looked shaken. Because this was no longer about Trump. This was about every American ever dismissed because of where they came from. In Jasmine's words, they heard vindication. Your worth is not in your last name. Your worth is in what you build. The silence was unbearable. The man who had branded himself as the embodiment of superior genes sat under the cold lights, his myth shattered, his pride gutted. But Donald Trump was not a man who surrendered easily. With trembling hands gripping the edge of the desk, he leaned forward, searching for words that could save him. This is fake, fabricated. You all know I built an empire. I became president. I changed history. That's not adoption, that's destiny. That's proof of the Trump gene. The words rang hollow. His voice cracked uneven, the confidence gone. And the cameras captured it, the hesitation, the panic, the loss of rhythm in a man who had mastered television for decades. Even worse, his own contradictions betrayed him. Just moments earlier, he had declared, results speak louder than DNA. And now he was clinging again to the very myth Jasmine had just destroyed. The contradiction was fatal. The myth of the Trump gene wasn't dismantled by Jasmine Crockett. It was dismantled by Trump himself live on a national television. His eyes darted across the room, glassy and unfocused. For the first time, Donald Trump looked not like a titan of power, but like a man cornered by his own lies. The room was holding its breath. Trump's words had collapsed under their own weight, leaving only silence and the flicker of camera lights. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She leaned toward the microphone, her tone calm, steady, almost compassionate. Maybe it's time you stop being proud of so-called good blood. Maybe it's time you take pride in something far more powerful, that you were once an adopted child from Queens and you rose above it. Her words were a scalpel, cutting precise but never cruel. The hearing room shifted. Reporters scribbled furiously. Even the stone-faced committee members couldn't hide the flicker of recognition. She wasn't just ending Trump's mythology, she was offering him a way out, a chance to rewrite his own story. For the first time in the entire spectacle, Trump had no retort, no laughter, no deflection, no bravado, only silence. And in that silence, America heard something louder than any slogan Trump had ever shouted. The truth spoken not with malice, but with grace. The lights still burned hot. The cameras still rolled. But in that final moment, it no longer felt like a hearing. It felt like a reckoning. This wasn't just about Donald Trump. It wasn't about superior blood. It wasn't even about politics. It was about something far deeper: truth, choice, and dignity. For 77 years, a myth had towered over America. A myth of inheritance, of destiny, of better genes. And in just 47 seconds, it was gone. Shattered not by rage, not by humiliation, but by a simple act of unveiling a woman holding a white envelope and daring to speak the truth. History, one journalist whispered, that night didn't change because someone shouted louder. It changed because someone chose honesty over fear. And so it was. From that day on, Americans told and retold the story. Not the myth of Trump DNA, but the truth of what makes America extraordinary, not bloodlines, not privilege, but the chance for any child, adopted, orphaned immigrant to rise, to fight, to build. A story that will live forever in the nation's memory. A story that reminded America, sometimes it only takes 47 seconds to change history forever. What this story teaches us is simple yet profound. Your value does not come from your bloodline, your last name, or the myths you inherit. It comes from the choices you make, the struggles you overcome, and the integrity you carry through life. Being adopted, being an immigrant, or being from a humble beginning is not a weakness. It is proof that resilience, love, and determination can build something far stronger than privilege ever could. So when life tells you that you don't belong, remember this. History changes not because of perfect blood, but because of imperfect people who dare to stand up, speak truth, and rise higher than anyone thought possible. If this story made you feel something, if it opened your eyes or reminded you of the strength within ordinary people, then don't stop here. Hit subscribe to join Mr. Expose Stories, where we uncover the truths, the struggles, and the victories that shape our world. Because the next story may just change the way you see everything.